Okay, so for question 5, it was based on a partnership. Now, how do I know it's actually a partnership? If you just look in the accounts they've given you Capital, M Manchester, L Liverpool, current account, drawings account. So based on how they've disclosed it, you already know this is a partnership. But now if we scroll to the bottom, let's see what information do they actually require from you. So in this question, they ask you to open, post to, and balance the appropriation account in the general ledger of Newcastle Enterprises for the year ended 29 February and round to the second decimal place. Now here they've indicated you need to round it to the second decimal place. So if they tell you that, it means some of the amounts will have cents in them. Now remember, a general ledger account looks like this. We also call it a T account. Okay, so that means you need to do an appropriation account, but in this format. A general journal is what we've done previously in the previous question. Okay, now your appropriation account for a partnership specifically is where we show the distribution of the profit to your partners. So that is what we are doing. We are showing the profit that is distributed to our partners specifically by using the initial profit and loss and then adjusting it for partnership specific expenses or income, and then work out how much would go to each partner. Okay, now let's quickly see what type of information have they given to you. So they have given you the balances for the year ended 29 Feb. So these are generally already updated unless otherwise indicated. So in this scenario, they told you that the capital was on the 1st of March. The current account is on the 1st of March, which means our movement or the movement in equity for the year has not been reflected as yet. Okay. Now remember, for a partnership, our capital is the physical capital they've put into the partnership, whereas the current account is any movement in your profits that you've received, any drawings you take out would run through your current account. Okay, so that would generally show any movement in your capital holding within that partnership. Then they've given you drawings, they've given you a replacement reserve, they've given you a profit and loss. Now your profit and loss would be used for your appropriation account. Okay, so this is our starting point, and then we would adjust it for any additional information or interest and expenses that would need to be accounted for specifically for your partnership. Okay. Now, because the profit and loss is on the credit side, we have a profit so far. So in your appropriation account, you would disclose that profit and loss amount on the same side as it is in your trial balance here. Okay, now let's look at the additional information based on the partnership agreement. They tell you interest on capital must be appropriated at 5% per annum. The capital account remains constant. Now you have to think from the partnership's point of view. We pay interest on capital those partners leave in the partnership, so that is an expense to the partnership. So that would mean we would have to debit that. So interest on capital is an expense which is debited. Okay, now we know it's 5% per annum based on their balance. The capital remained constant, so there was no changes. So we would then multiply this with 5%, the 50,000, and we will multiply the 70,000 with 5% to get to the interest component. Okay, so the interest based on that, let me just quickly get my calculations here. Okay, so we would add the 50 and the 70,000. So our interest on capital, if you do the total calculation, would have been a value of 6,000 Rand. Okay. So that is for those two. Then the next one, they tell you interest on drawings must be appropriated at 12% per annum. Assume drawings were made 3 months prior. Okay, now what that means, drawings were made 3 months prior, is I have done the drawing 3 months before year end. So interest would only be levied for 3 months. Okay, so this is what that information there means. How many months do I have to work out the interest for? Now, the drawings amount is the 5,000 and the 4,000. So you would take the 5,000 plus the 4,000. We would multiply it with 12%. We would multiply it with 3 over 12. Now, what they could also do is they could have different drawing periods for different partners. So just make sure that you read the information. Okay, so if you work that out, you should get to a value of 270,000 for the interest on drawings. Let's just say, yeah, interest on drawings. Then the next one is interest on the current account. It must be based on the opening balances. So that's why they've given you the opening balances, and it is 7% per annum. Now for the current account, it is very important that you look at whether it's a debit or a credit balance. If it is a credit balance, we will have to pay it to the partner, which is an expense. Whereas if it's a debit balance, the partner will have to pay the partnership. So in this scenario, our current balances, the debits are more than the credits, which means we would receive more interest income than we would expense. Okay, so in this scenario, to work out the interest on your current, you would take the 18,000, you would deduct the 8,000, which is the smaller one, you would multiply it with the 7% we have to charge, and you would get to an interest value of 700 Rand, which we would receive the net amount. Okay. Okay, so that is our additional information. Then let's continue. Both partners must receive an annual salary. So that would be an expense for the partnership. So this would, we would debit our appropriation account because it is an expense. Okay, and the annual bonus exactly the same. So the bonuses to our partners is also an expense to our partnership. And then they tell you 35,000 must be transferred to your replacement reserve. So what that means is we are removing a portion of the profits to the replacement reserve. Now, what we generally do is they use those reserves for a rainy day when they need some money. So what they do is instead of distributing it to the partners, they move it to a separate fund for when they require that money. So that would also reduce your profit. So that would be also a debit amount. So because we will reduce the profit. And then they tell you the remaining profits needs to be split 5-3. Now what that means is Manchester will receive 5/8%, and Liverpool will receive 3/8. Now, how do I know it's over 8? I take the two amounts here, the 5 and the 3, add them together to work out what is the total, and that is how I determine the portion or the ratio that we will apply. If they do not give you this split, however, you would use your capital balances here at the top to do the profit ratio. So it would be 50 over 120 or 70 over 120 if the ratios are not provided. Okay, so that's just important to note for in case they ask it like that. Okay, now based on this information, I'm going to share the Excel. Let's see how do we now actually complete the appropriation account based on the information provided. Okay, so I said for the appropriation account, the first thing you have to account for is the profit and loss based on the information provided. So that is step one. If it is a profit, it is on your credit side. If it is a loss, it would be on the debit side. And you write their profit and loss and the amount as per the trial balance. Okay, then based on the information, we are going to apply the additional information now. So the first thing we have to account for is the interest on capital. Now we said interest on capital is an expense for the partnership. So that means we will have to debit it to reduce our profit with the amount for the interest on capital. Now, can we just make it a little bit bigger and then I'll just move from left to right. Okay, so how we did it, we took the 70,000 for the one partner plus the 50,000 for the other partner, multiplied with 5%. To give me a value of 6,000 Rand. Then point 2 was the interest on drawings. Now we said interest on drawings is income because the partners borrowed money. So income would be on the credit side of our appropriation account, and we would do the 5,000 Rand plus the 4,000. We multiplied with the 12% that is charged, but in this scenario, we've only taken out the money 3 months prior to year end, so we apportion it for 3 months to get to a value of 270. Then the interest on the current account, we said it's important to see if it's a debit or credit balance. Now in this scenario, the debit balances exceeded the credit balances, which means the partner borrowed money, which means we receive interest on current account, which is also income. So the net amount we receive is 700 Rand from the partners. Now in this scenario, you deduct the two from one another. If you decide to do interest on the one, interest on the other one, you would still receive the marks because you are still reflecting the same thing. Then point 4 was the salaries. Now we said salaries are also an expense to the partnership. In this scenario, you will have to show the salaries for each partner separate because of the fact that it also goes to their current accounts normally. So you show them separately, the salary for the two partners. Then the annual bonus. Now bonuses we generally only pay to one of the partners, so you call it bonuses to partners is the account, and we just reflect the amount as an expense, the 10,000 Rand. And then the replacement reserve, because we are removing a portion of the profit into another equity account, we would also debit the account with the replacement reserve value. Now the last step, what do we have to do? Remember your appropriation account, your debits must equal your credits once you are done. So what we do now is we look at which side is the bigger one. Now we know the credit side is in this scenario bigger than the right hand side. So our total is the 429,970. Now we need to work out what is the remaining profit and loss that will be distributed. Now you can either take this amount, deduct these, or you can do a calculation like this, just separate. So what I did is I took all the income, added it together, deducted all the expenses, to get to a remaining profit of 259,970. Now that remaining profit then gets distributed to your partner's current account based on their profit share. So you take the 259,970 and you multiply it with 5/8 for Manchester, and 3/8 for Liverpool to get to a profit amount of 162,481.25 or 97,488.75. So that's why they asked you to show the second decimals, because of the fact that cents was distributed as well. And this is how you would have to do the appropriation account for your partners specifically. Okay, do you guys have any questions on the appropriation account for your partnership? Okay, so we've got a question online. If the profit and loss was favorable, a debit. Okay, so remember, profit and loss is unfavorable if it's a debit. Then you made a loss. Okay, it is favorable when it's a credit, then you made a profit. Would you then place the profit and loss on the debit side? Yes, that's correct. So if you made a loss, so it's an unfavorable balance, it would be on the debit side as opposed to the credit side. So you would place it exactly the same side as the side it is shown in your trial balance. Does that answer your question? Okay, we're going to take a quick break. So let's be back then at 10:30. Then we'll continue with the last two questions.